Well, hi everybody, it's Rusty here, and hiking season is just about to get underway, and I'm getting a little excited. I've already bought my train tickets for my trip down to Roanoke, Virginia, so I can start my long hike. And in keeping with the theme of my most recent videos, I want to talk about how do I adjust my hikes, given that I'm a 64-year-old and not a 22-year-old who's going out there. So, let's find out. So as I think about getting out on the trail again, I have to ask myself, are we all equal when we're out on the trail? I mean, I've been making a big deal about age having its advantages, but does that mean that the playing field is level? Well, there's a couple ways to look at this. First of all, it's a bad metaphor because we're not in competition. We look at these gentlemen on the left and these youngsters on the right, and we say, well, they're not competing against each other. So the playing field analogy really isn't a good one. I think it depends on what the goal is. And the measure has got to be how much do we enjoy our hikes. And in order to do that, we're going to be doing different hikes. I'm not going to be putting on 150 miles in a week. But I am still going to be, I hope, enjoying my hike as much as they are. So let's talk about it. Well, first of all, before you start, if you're an older hiker, you've got to know your health status. Are you healthy enough to be hiking? Despite the fact that I've said age shouldn't, hinder you, the fact is there can be a lot of hidden accumulated damage to our systems from years and years of living, however we've chosen or had to live, had forced upon us. Does your doctor agree that you're healthy enough to go? Now, I will warn you, don't put the burden on your doctor to make the decision for you. The doctors are very conservative. If they think you have a 1% chance of having a heart attack while you're out there, they're going to tell you not to go because it's it's a little bit of CYA. You may say, well, if I've got a 5% chance of having a heart attack out there, well, I've got a 95% chance of not having a heart attack out there. So, I like those odds. I'm going to go hiking. Your doctor may not balance the equation that way. And then finally, does your family agree that it's okay for you to go hiking? You're ultimately responsible to them if that's your living situation. And I really do put a lot of weight into how Darlene feels about me getting out there. And like, for example, last year she said, when are you going to get out on the trail? I knew that was a signal that she wanted me out of the house. So how do I adjust? Well, first of all, there's preparation. I do early season day hikes. And I also do day hikes with a full multi-day pack as if that was a day out on the trail and I'm going to be out there for several days. I don't actually go out for several days because I'm doing these hikes generally in April. The point is, I'm not going to go hitting a trail, faced with 730 miles when I haven't had some conditioning, because no matter how much I do on my hamster machine at home, that's my elliptical trainer, it's better than nothing, but let's make no illusions, have no illusions. It's not the same as being out there and hiking. And I'll also do some weekend hikes or 1 or 2 nights out on the trail, either this loop into Green Mountains, which I really love, which is going from the trailhead near Bennington up to Glastonbury shelter area, and then around the West Ridge Trail back down to the parking area. Or last year I did what's called an out and back. I just hiked as far as I felt I could get back the next day. Along that same trail, I went beyond Glastonbury out to the one of the shelters out there, Kid Gore shelter, and camped out there. Because ultimately, a wise man once said, the trail gets you in shape for the trail, and that's really what you need to do. Even if you're going to go on a through hike, if you're an older individual, you really do have to get prepared with some warm-up hikes. Okay, another way I adjust. Well, my equipment. I get lightweight equipment, but not too light. And here's the key. I talked about this in an earlier video. Here is a sleeping pad that I had. It weighed 6 ounces, so because I was saving every little ounce. And it's actually much more comfortable than it looks when you're sleeping on your back. It's actually a specialty item for winter backpackers, I believe. Um, and it's much less comfortable when you're on your side. And I just found that it didn't work for me. Um, the comfort is actually important. You have to sleep well out on the trail, as an example. So there's an example of going too light. So I'd like to go as light as I reasonably can, but it's got to be tempered with your actual hiking needs. Um, I'm conservative with the fuel supply. My previous video, I had talked about, I could bring 100 milligram, 100 gram, I guess it was grams, 100 gram canister. I could bring a 230 gram canister. I'm going to bring the 230 with me for my long trip because that should be, it's not way too much, but it's enough for me to be able to cook every night I'm out on the trail and then still have a little bit of spare for, maybe some morning, sometimes in the morning, maybe I'll want to cook something or heat up some warm water if it's a cold morning, or for washing up, heating up a little bit of water there. Knowing the climate, there is nothing worse than being out on the trail and realizing that you're way too cold for the clothing that you have with me. So, make sure that you know what you're getting into. August in Maine, for example, is very cold. Even down south at the higher elevations, you can get caught in a cold snap. So just make sure you have warm enough clothing with you. Having too much clothing, other than the extra weight, doesn't really hurt. You just don't put it on if you don't need it. So I think what we ought to be concentrating on is perfecting our use of our equipment. Not perfecting the equipment, not going for every little thing and going for the next new thing. Improve your routine incrementally, get used to using your equipment, and I think that you'll actually be far better off if you kind of perfect the use of your equipment. I mean, I saw this in the defense industry all the time, where in developing software, we'd have some new set of tools, and by the time we learned how to use it, the next big thing was out, and we'd throw that away and we'd start on the next thing, and we never really perfected any of them because we were always trying to move to the next thing. So that's probably a bad idea with your hiking equipment when you bring it too far. For food, I always make sure that I have no matter when I think I'm going to be able to resupply next. While I'm doing one resupply, I'm looking ahead to the next resupply and figuring out how many days it's going to take. Always plan for an extra day. Things can happen out on the trail, and I just make sure that I can always come into town planning to have an extra day, and sometimes I don't have that extra day of food because I've actually had to use it out on the trail. I understand and respect my body's nutritional needs. Now, I happen to live a lower carb lifestyle. I don't get into keto or anything like that. I don't know if I've been in ketosis, maybe I have. But out on the trail, I'm just not able to do it. So I can't maintain that low carb lifestyle out there, and I just it doesn't work for me. So respecting what my body's telling me over what I prefer to do when I'm at home means I'll actually eat a little bit more in the way of carbohydrates while out on the trail. I mean, here's an example: the beef stroganoff, from Mountain House. If you look at that and you're a low carber, tears will come to your eyes thinking about eating that, and not in a good way. But that's just the way it is out in the trail. My body has told me, no, dude, you can't do it. I stay hydrated. I actually have once a day, I have some electrolyte mix, whether it's Propel or something else. My daughter Katrina had bought me some other stuff, which I brought. I forgot the name of it. But that's when I realized how much help it was to have that. Okay, I have certain rules while I'm hiking. I've talked about these before. I have my 2-hour campsite rule. If it's once I've hit 2 hours before sundown, it's time to start looking for a camping spot. Unless I know that there's a particular shelter that's maybe a mile ahead or something that I'm headed for, if I don't have any better prospects, I'm going to look and take the first good prospect that I find. And there is a trick out in the woods. A lot of people talk about it. If you extend your hand out and hold it up to the horizon, each of your fingers is about between the bottom of the sun and the horizon, as you look at it, each finger is about 15 minutes. So if you do both your hands out there and you say, well, if the sun is that far above the horizon, that means I've got 2 hours of daylight, and it's time to start looking, because you don't want to wait until sundown to start having to cook and set up your camp. It's just much more relaxing and much more fun to do it when there's a bit of daylight left. I have a 1 week hostel hotel campground rule, and by campground I mean like an organized one that maybe has showers and that sort of stuff, just to give myself a break. Be able to wash my clothes, be able to eat a little more, be able, in the case of a hostel or a hotel, sleep on a more comfortable bed. And that's something that I really didn't enforce on myself on my section hike last year. And I went 500 miles before my body forced me to actually take a break. I was feeling great, and then all of a sudden both my ankles gave out on me. So I don't think I'm going to do that again. Every 100 miles, I'm going to make sure that I get a stop. Now, I did stop at hostels. I didn't hike 500 straight miles. But the point is that, well, actually, it's coming up when I talk about my 100-mile rule, making sure I give myself a break. I ease into it. There's no shame in only going 6 miles on your first day, especially if you had a long trip to get down there. Last year, I took a bus down there, then I had to walk to a hostel, and then the next day, it was a very muggy day, I only made 6 miles. So be it. That's what it took to get to the first shelter, and then I gradually increased my distance, and I fell into a sequence of about 100 miles a week. So here's the 100-mile rule I was actually alluding to earlier. Every 100 miles, I make sure that I take a NERO, which is a near zero day, or a 0 day. In other words, give myself a break. Just do a little bit less. I'm more likely to do a 0 day if I'm at a hostel, and especially if I'm dealing with resupply, just getting around like that. But, if you can do a NERO day, in other words, suppose your choice is a shelter that's 15 miles away, or a hostel that's 4 miles from where you are when you get up in the morning. Just, once a week, make the decision in favor of going to the hostel. Always know where the next shelter and hostel and resupply are. I always plan ahead. When I'm resupplying, like I said earlier, an extra day's worth of food to make sure I can get to my next resupply, but I always have to know where that resupply is. Safety, I've talked about this many times before. I do have the Garmin tracker that pings every half hour, so my family knows where I am. My phone does have the Far Out application on it, or Gut Hook. It's one of those razors and razor blades thing. The app is actually free, but you have to pay like $10 for each of the maps. It's not too expensive given what they give you, and there's a lot of information in there. Plus, the phone has a GPS in it, so my fear of losing the trail just isn't there if you know how to use the GPS. I bring a battery pack with me. Ounce for ounce, it seems like for about a pound of battery pack, you can get 4,000 milliamp hours. And I don't actually bring a 40,000. I don't bring a 40,000. I bring something like a 28,000. It's like 3/4 of a pound, which is quite a bit. But it's important for me to be able to keep that tracker charged and to keep my phone charged, because I depend on those while I'm out there. And then, of course, I do report back nightly, like I've said in one of my other videos about communicating with home. If I'm out of range of a cell tower or don't have 4G service, I can use the satellite network to get a brief message out to my wife. She actually has a list of all the campsites and all the shelters and all the hostels that I'm likely to come across. So each day I can report to her exactly where I am. So in conclusion, here's a picture of the temple at Delphi. You've heard about the oracle at Delphi. And there's two famous sayings and one a little bit less famous saying that are actually associated with this. The first is know thyself. In the context of ancient Greek mythology or ancient Greek religion, it meant something a little different than what we think of, but know thyself. I don't push myself too far. I am limited to about 100 miles a week out on the trail. I'm not going to try pushing for, personal records, trying to get out there and do, 150 miles in a week. So Uh, Going along with that is the nothing to excess. Again, I'm not going to try overdoing it. And there's a third saying, much less well known, and I've seen various different translations of it. But certainty brings ruin is the translation I like best. When I see people out there making all these plans down to the greatest little detail, it's just it's gonna having that kind of certainty when you're off the trail does take a little bit of joy out of it. And as soon as you stray off that plan, you're going to get bent out of shape about it, perhaps blood pressure go up, whatever. So having plans that are too certain is just going to ruin your trip for you. I mean, that's how I apply it to this. I'm sure you could apply it to other aspects of life. So that's how I make adjustments for my hikes, going out there as a more mature hiker. Thanks for listening.